So we said we were going to start today with Chilul Hashem, and we're going to do this article, which is available at the website as well for those on KosherTube, www.nishma.org, and it's called Divining Chilul Hashem, and it's available on the website. So we're going to deal with that, and the reason we're going to deal with it is because colloquially we have an idea that you can't do certain things because if a non-Jew sees you doing it, it will be quote-unquote a Chilul Hashem, it will look bad. They'll consider you to be immoral or something of that nature. That's a colloquial understanding.
Is something bad or necessarily immoral? Those are two...
It does something. The fact that there are situations where something may be halachically mutter, halachically permitted, but you're told not to do it because it will be Chilul Hashem, because non-Jews will perceive it to be something that is immoral or unethical. Okay? In other words, there's certain things where you shouldn't do something because people will perceive it as being wrong, and you'll look bad. You know, you won't look like a moral people.
Okay, is that driven by what non-Jews necessarily, what only non-Jews think, as opposed to, let's say, I'm a religious Zionist, I don't care what the Haredi think, or I don't care what the Reform think.
Okay, so that's exactly that's what it leads into. The point is, it seems on the surface, whether it's non-religious Jews or non-Jews, it seems to be that those people who are outside of our group, who look at things through their own moral perception, will see us negatively, and that won't look good. In other words, don't do that because it's a Chilul Hashem. It's because they'll see you as doing something wrong, which seems to imply that you're giving credence to their moral perceptions. Right? So that seems to be the issue that's before us. And that's how we got to Chilul Hashem as a category of something that gives some type of validity to a yardstick, an ethical or moral yardstick outside of Torah.
So does that imply that within your own community, whatever that means, but within your own community, that it's impossible to commit a Chilul Hashem?
No, you see, the thing is that would be an aspect where if you do something which in your community is perceived to be unethical, you're already doing an avera, right? So the point is, if you do an avera, then there's a perception that other people will see this, and that would also be a Chilul Hashem. Whereas if a person goes out and eats a Big Mac in public, is it possible it's a Chilul Hashem? It's possible, but you're already doing an avera. But the people who see you doing that are applying the same moral standing, right? You're doing something that, pursuant to our yardstick, is incorrect. The colloquial thing of Chilul Hashem is that you're doing something and non-Jews will perceive it as incorrect, and you seem to be saying, well, the non-Jews who perceive it as incorrect are applying their yardstick, and we're giving credence to their yardstick. Yeah.
When you say it's a Chilul Hashem, because they're using their yardstick, I think when you act like that, you in fact are giving credence to their yardstick.
Right. That's exactly it. Then that seems to that's why I'm raising the issue. The fact is, that's what we're going to look at. Is that what you're really doing? But the point is you're giving credence. The underlying question here is that if morality is defined by Torah, or morality is defined by revelation, then basically that's the source of morality, and any moral decisions that are outside of revelation are irrelevant. Okay, so people feel that it's immoral to do something, who cares? If people feel it's immoral to use fur, right, animal fur, right, who cares? The Torah doesn't ask for it, so who cares? Right? In other words, that's a perspective. Do I care about someone else's morality? Now, there's another side to the coin where the point is, if you say you're concerned about Chilul Hashem, and you're concerned about how people, non-Jews, will look at you, So that seems to say you are giving some value to their moral perception. Now, it gets a little bit more complicated. What happens if there actually is a conflict between the Torah moral perception and this non-Jewish moral perception? Okay, like for example, in the case of animal fur, because there are people out there who think that this is immoral to use animal fur. Do I care? Okay, do I care at all? And if I say I should have some care because the yardstick has some validity, it may not have enough validity to trump my yardstick, the halachic yardstick. Yeah.
I'm not sure this is a valid commentary, but I'm thinking about the situation of Jews in Israel.
Uh-huh.
Now, if some people think this is an occupation, this is certain other things, do I have to care? Or Kever Rachel was originally a mosque, etc., etc.
It wasn't originally a mosque.
Well, I said some people claim, whatever it is.
No. It was a mosque for many, many centuries. The question is what was the, I don't want to say originally, but at some point in time became a mosque for a long time. Okay.
Do I have to be extra careful? Okay. I guess in that sense, and I know I have my own views on this, I guess I'm bothered by the attention I have to pay to a false judgment.
Let me give you two cases that highlight why this whole course is happening, what I'm trying to deal with it. What I've been trying to highlight for the last few shurim is the fact that there seems to be something within Torah that says there is something called natural morality, that somehow human beings have something inside them that says that there is something that they can have a feeling of what's moral, what's not. Okay. So the point is, we saw that from the statement of Yasher B'nai Adam, the statement of the Sifri, that you do what's straight in the eyes of man. Okay. I'm now taking that into a new category of Chilul Hashem, which seems to be somewhat tied to caring about the ethical standards outside. Okay. Now to show you the two cases where it gets complicated. There was an article that was put out maybe 10 years ago, written by a couple of Rabbanim in Yehuda Shomron, the territories. I'm trying not to be political in terms of how I refer to this land. But the fact is these two Rabbanim came out and said that there's so many people concerned about how we're treating the Palestinians. We have to be careful how we treat them, and so forth and so forth. This is ridiculous. It's irrelevant, right? We are bound totally to Torah, and therefore the only morality is the revelational morality of Torah. And to bring home the point, they turn to a Kedesh Yitzchak. They say, "Look at this Kedesh Yitzchak. Kadosh Baruch Hu said, go sacrifice Yitzchak. Avraham did it. Was there an issue of morals? Nothing. Irrelevant. We don't worry about the morals. If God says to do it, that's it. Our own personal moral perceptions don't matter. So if we're told to go in there and to completely obliterate the Palestinians, who cares? That's what Torah tells us to do. Well, you feel a little bit bad about them, you feel bad about them. Who cares? That's not a valid concern. Okay? That's an extreme viewpoint of this viewpoint. The people who wrote this article came under a tremendous amount of criticism. They seem to say that in Torah we don't care about any feelings of natural morality. The only morality we have is revelational morality from Har Sinai, and anything else is irrelevant. Okay, that's one viewpoint. Okay, that's an extreme viewpoint. So I'm taking it up and saying, no, something, and other people tie to these people. What are you talking about? There's Yasher B'nai Adam. But at the same point in time that there's Yasher B'nai Adam, there's got to be a limit to it. For example, I'm bringing up the case of animal fur. Because there are people upset about animal fur, does that mean that I have to take that into account as a halachic Jew? And what about when there's a machlokas in natural morality, such as happens in animal fur? So let me give you another example. There's a famous tshuva of Moshe that allows artificial insemination with a non-husband donor. Okay, it was a famous tshuva of Moshe that says artificial insemination. Now, Moshe mated it in theory. If you read his argument, he says, but you got to make sure that the husband really is okay with it. And he doubts that a husband is really okay with a wife carrying a child that's from someone else's seed. And he wonders whether it will work well in terms of a family. He has a lot of preconditions and so forth and so forth. And he basically says no one should be mocked to this without being specific to the situation and so forth. And I think he actually says he never was mocked to it on a specific case. But he says in theory, artificial insemination by a non-husband donor is mutter. Okay. Why? Because in order to have a question of a rayas of being over adultery, you actually have to have sexual intercourse. Therefore, the placing of the seed in a woman is not. There's no problem of adultery, and there's no problem of the child being a mamzer. Now the fact is not everyone agreed with him. The Satmar Rav was very upset with this. The Satmar Rav held the child's not a mamzer, but for sure it's aser, based upon a Ramban in Chumash. Okay. The point is, and Ramban has his arguments, so forth and so forth. Okay. The point is there was tremendous issues about this. Moshe was attacked left and right. There was a rabbi in Switzerland, Rabbi Broich, I think was his name, who wrote a critique of Moshe. And in the critique of Moshe, he basically said that he quoted a Sefer Hasidim. Sefer Hasidim said something about that which the non-Jewish world thinks it doesn't do, we should not do either. Okay, the example case in Sefer Hasidim is non-Jews did not eat a certain thing, which was technically kosher. So basically he says non-Jews feel that that's disgusting or wrong, incorrect. So therefore the Sefer Hasidim says non-Jews also should not eat this. Pardon? No, he says non-Jews. Yeah, Jews should not eat it. Non-Jews don't eat it. For Jews should not eat it either. There are certain aspects of if non-Jews think that a certain behavior is wrong, is disgusting, Jews should not do that behavior either. That's what the Sefer Hasidim seems to say. So this person quoted Moshe and said, how can you matir artificial insemination because the Catholic Church prohibited it? And we work less moral than the Catholic Church. They permitted it, they prohibit it, and we permit it. We look less moral than them. A few other sources. Moshe went to town against this guy, like basically saying, since when do we care what the Catholic Church says? Okay, and he says on the Sefer Hasidim is not something I'm talking about morality. He's talking about things that are disgusting, about the shaksu. In other words, if human beings, if don't eat a certain thing that theoretically is kosher, it's not you shouldn't eat it because it's immoral, because people think it's disgusting. So that's what the Sefer Hasidim is talking about. It's not talking about morality, it's talking about a feeling of disgust. But Moshe is very adamant, since when do we care what the Catholic Church considers in terms of morality? The fact is what would hit me about this is that, aside from Moshe's issue, is that the position of abortion in the world is not so clear-cut. Right? The Catholic Church is dead against, I'm talking artificial insemination. This is artificial. The Catholic Church is dead set against it. But there are many, many other people who think it's moral to do artificial insemination. So the fact that this Rav was a big poster, by the way. This Rabbi Breitsch was a big poster. He says, hey, look, the Catholic Church also says we can't be less moral than the Catholic Church. The fact is there are many, many other people who apply this morality to say it's good to do it. So why pick the Catholic Church's decision? So the fact is natural morality is not so clear-cut at all.
But it has to be universal in a sense.
Right, in a certain sense. But the fact is this person was trying to say, but the fact is it's not so clear-cut. And even so, Moshe says, basically, what do we care about the Catholic Church? The point is that if you are going to consider aspects of morality, you have to figure out what morality you're going to consider. and then also, if you're going to give them a voice at all. So that's part of the issue over here. There is a natural morality going on over there. First issue is, does it have any credit? So they have the cases with these Rabbanim who wrote this article, who basically say we don't care about natural morality. And the other point is, where do you listen to it? And then you go back to the issue with Kever Rachel and things of that nature. There, it's completely in conflict with the Torah concept. Torah concept says Eretz Yisrael is ours. So the fact is that these people say, but these people lived there for years and so forth and so forth. Well, you should be nice to them. Well, maybe there's an issue like that, but the Torah doesn't blow the trumpet. So the point is, it's a very complex situation. It's very easy just to say, it's not. The only morality we have to listen to is the halacha. Halacha says it's mutter, we don't care. But if you're going to give credence to their perceptions of morality, then you have the issue of, okay, what perception of morality, and what happens if it's in conflict with the Torah perception? How do you balance it in that regard?
I think two observations here. First of all, I think we have to be cognizant that no one is completely bias-free. People bring with them their perceptions, rightly or wrongly. Those who are more of an anti-religious bent will go out of their way to look for hypocrisy by religious people in their behavior as a way of justifying their own particular philosophical approach. Right? So nobody comes through with it entirely. So, do we take those things into consideration or not, which is part of that. And then I think there's also sort of two levels, perhaps, of Chilul Hashem that on the higher level or the broader level are things that are so egregious and obvious that people perceive. And then there are Chilul Hashem that takes place sort of within the Jewish community, that because we are more nuanced to these things, we will recognize what the Avera is. So take two examples of people. Okay, I would say in sort of more recent news, look at Rubashkin, the story of Rubashkin, right? Who's now been, I guess, sentenced and going to be in jail for a very long time, and seen as someone who clearly violated state law, immigration laws, etc. On this, and that's seen by the general population in one way in terms of how they view a Jew who is clearly flouting state and other laws. Whether he was properly prosecuted is another issue. And then you have perhaps someone who, say Rahm Emanuel, who left as Obama's chief of staff, who I doubt most people would know that he was Jewish, let alone that he, has an Israeli father and Israeli mother, but even more so that his reputation of being, while claiming to be Orthodox in some orientation, his behavior on a personal level to people, his use of language, his bullying tactics would only be seen as a Chilul Hashem within more of the Jewish community.
That's an interesting thing. You see, we have to get to the definition of Chilul Hashem. We're going to look at that. But the fact is that there is our yardstick, right? And applying yardstick. When I heard about Rahm Emanuel's language, for example, right, that he was very colorful in the way he spoke, that to me, that's not proper behavior for a Jew. There's a question of Shmiras Haloshin, of Nibul Peh, stuff like that. I mean, the fact is that it's not a proper thing. But is it a Chilul Hashem? He's over Averas and so on, but the question is Chilul Hashem. But the fact is in our world, we live in a world that, Rahman al-Islam, it's like, it's like the more you swear, the more hush of a person you are, it seems, in this world, right? So the fact is that that's a standard, that's a standard of the world, and the point is we have our own standards. So we look at them and say that's not a standard, but it's not making it seem that the world out there is saying, look at this person, although I'm sure that there are people saying, look at this person. But the fact is the Rubashkin case is a real issue. what did they do contrary to halacha? Okay, now, possibilities, I don't know all the details of the case, but the question is people are going to saying, look at this non-Jew, that's really talking about a moral standard that's not from halacha. So the fact is, do you give credence to a moral standard? Now let me point out something. There's two concepts in dealing with this. One is Chilul Hashem, one is Ava. Ava is fear. Concept of Ava is you do something because you're afraid the non-Jews will have a repercussion against you. So, for example, there's certain questions where certain situations where there's a question of whether you should do something. Let's say so I'm trying to think of a good example. The classic example is that you're in a medical situation. There's a concept of medical situation where you have to treat a non-Jew, or even more than that, you have to treat an idolater. Okay? And there are questions about Jews treating an idolater, and there's questions about Jews being treated by an idolater, medically treated by it, right? Because there's a perception of lack of trust. There's a belief that if you were treating being treated by an idolater, the idolater may not care and may actually want to not do a good job as a doctor, actually try to kill you. So there's a certain limitation on Jews going to an idolatrous doctor, because the idolatrous doctor will want to not help you out. There's also a question of you treating idolaters. Okay, in other words, if an idolater comes to you, should you accept an idolater if you're a doctor as a patient? There's different concerns there. One of the concerns there is that if for some reason something goes wrong, people will blame you, right? They say, look at the Jew because he hates the idolaters, right? So it's better not to get involved in that situation where people will be able to blame you for it. But let's say you're in a situation where you can't walk away, right? You really want to walk away, but you can't walk away. Because if you walk away, the people will say, you see, the Jews don't even want to treat us, and the repercussion will be that they'll be negative against the Jews and stuff like that. So therefore, in that situation, Mipnei Eva, you treat everyone. The point there is not because of Chilul Hashem, it's because you are concerned of repercussions. That if you don't do certain things, there'll be a repercussion to the Jewish community for doing this, for that situation. Therefore, you better take care of them. But Chilul Hashem seems to be that people will see you to be immoral, right? It's not just because you're afraid that, like Rubashkin, oh boy, we better not do this kind of thing because there's going to be a pogrom. That's not the reason. The reason is better not do this kind of thing because we look bad in their eyes. And the question is why does it matter if we look bad in their eyes? If it's concern for the pogrom, that's okay. That's Ava. Why is it? Because that's where you get into Chilul Hashem, in the sense that it is considered to be mechalel, to profane the name of God, if non-Jews look at you negatively, which seems to imply that you have to consider the non-Jewish frame of reference, the non-Jewish yardstick. Which now is complicated because there's not one non-Jewish yardstick, and number two, sometimes this new Jewish yardstick really conflicts with your yardstick. Okay, now if it conflicts right on, then you have one issue. Like for example, that's really what happened with Milah on Hanukkah. We're in Kislev, so we're going to talk about Hanukkah. Hanukkah, the reason the Hellenists were so against Milah is because they felt that Milah was immoral. Right? Now you think in terms of female circumcision, what they call female circumcision nowadays, right? Okay? You hear about this ritual done by some people wherever, and you hear what they do, which is basically a mutilation of a young, even perhaps baby girl or girl. So the fact is people look upon it very negatively. Okay, so yeah, I won't do this. The fact is that's the way the Greeks looked at Mila, that you were mutilating, that these people mutilated their baby boys. It was a mutilation of the human body. It was a mutilation of the baby boys. How could they do this? And that's where it became. So the point is, at that point in time, they may have them right. Well, there the Torah says you have to do it, so you have to do it. So there's no question. That's the same way with Avraham Avinu saying to saying to Avraham, go be Makar of Yitzchak. The point is that that's just the way it is. But the point is, I got someone busy here. Okay. Anyways, okay. But the fact is that's something different. But the point is that what happens? Do you give credence to their value system if it's not in conflict with Torah?
Because it's not?
When it's not in conflict with Torah. Okay? Or is it differently when it's not in conflict, is it a consideration in how you do things? Is it supposed to be a consideration? Should you think about it a little bit? Just say, maybe it should have a voice, and I have to think about it a little bit, and maybe I can, if it's a chiyuv and not that, but if it's a question where something's mutter, right, I'm allowed to do this halachically, but maybe I shouldn't do it because the non-Jewish yardstick has a value.
Some would say that's a galut mentality, right?
Absolutely.
We are
Absolutely.
so much
right.
overly paranoid.
Well, no, we're overly
a weakness.
But that's Ava.
Yeah.
Ava is overly paranoid. But the fact is that some people say galus mentality because we're thinking too much of their moral perspective. And yet the fact is, and then you have the statement of Moshe about the Catholic Church. Who cares about the Catholic Church? Right? Why should we care about their morality at all? Right? And don't we have our own moral statements that are contrary to them? Okay? Now, the fact is that the definition of Chilul Hashem is what we have to look at, because it's not so simple the way colloquial people think what a Chilul Hashem is. But before I get to Chilul Hashem, I want to look at three mitzvahs in the Rambam. So the fact is I copied, I think easier for when I copied the English translation of Rabbi Chevelle of the Sefer Mitzvahs. And two of them are Kiddush Hashem and Chilul Hashem, but the first one we'll look at is Avos Hashem. Okay? And this is a very significant one. Okay? Because there's a mitzvah to love God. But if you look on the second page of the handout, your handouts are two-sided. If you look on the second page of this handout, the Sefer Mitzvahs, it's over here. It's over there. Right. Okay? Okay? So listen to what he says over here. You see the paragraph that begins the sages? It's on page 4. See? Yeah, it's the other side. Okay?
Sages say that this
okay. The sages say that this commandment also includes an obligation to call upon all mankind to serve him, exalted be he, and to have faith in him. Contrary to a lot of people's perception, Judaism is, on a certain level, a missionizing religion. It is a proselytizing religion, at least according to the Rambam. For sure, according to the Rambam, it seems to be that we have an obligation to, clearly according to the Rambam, we have an obligation to try and get the entire world to follow the 7 Noahide laws. No, we don't call upon people to be Jewish, but we call upon people to follow the Noahide laws. It seems to be the Rambam's position. So he says over here that we have an obligation to try and call upon all mankind to serve him, which means follow the 7 Noahide, and to have faith in him. Okay? Now, the fact is that was Avraham Avinu. Avraham was a person who proselytized, who tried to spread the name of God. Right? And people came to his tent, he'd say, don't thank me, thank Kodesh Baruch Hu, and stuff like that. He tried to we're going to get to that in a second. For just as you praise and extol anybody whom you love, and call upon others also to love him, So, if you love the Lord to the extent of the conception of his true nature to which you have attained, and you will undoubtedly call upon the foolish and ignorant to seek knowledge of the truth which you have already acquired. Right? If you love God, then you want to share, like you love someone, you want to go up and say, hey, this is my good friend, like you to meet him. Right? I remember one time, and I might have told you guys this story a long time ago. I was once speaking in Providence, Rhode Island, and it was very funny. This was like, I think it was like the lunch. I sort of said to everyone that we were going to have a question and answer. I was willing to have a question and answer with everyone. So I remember standing in the room there, and this guy gets up there, an older guy, and says, Rabbi, just want you to know, 30 years ago, in exactly the place you were standing, we had a Protestant minister speak in the shul. And he said, I don't get you Jews. If you think you have the truth, how come you're not trying to spread it around and tell other people about it? If you think you have the truth, if you think you have the truth that can benefit mankind, why aren't you going out there and telling others? Right? And he says, I don't understand why you don't go out there missionizing. And this guy says, and this has bothered me for 30 years. That most people like talking about how Jews don't proselytize. The fact is you don't recognize that non-Jews look upon that negatively. If you think you have something good, why aren't you sharing it? If you got the cure for cancer, why are you only keeping it for yourself? So if you have the truth, why aren't you sharing it? Okay? So he said, do you have an answer? And I said, the truth is that there is a concept of sharing it. That was Avram Avinu. The fact is, we do want to share the seven mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Okay, so the fact is, and that comes from our caring for mankind, but also from the fact that if you love God, and therefore that is a positive thing, you want to share it. Okay, so then he goes on then. As the Sifri says, this is the Rambam, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God. This means that you should make him beloved of man, as Abraham your father did. As it is said, and the souls they had gotten in Haran. That is to say, just as Abraham, being a lover of the Lord, as Scripture testifies, Abraham, my friend, by the power of this conception of God, and out of his great love for him, summoned mankind to believe, you too must so love him as to summon mankind onto him. Okay? You should try and make people believe in God. Now, this goes on to say, in the classic pasuk is the people they made in Haran, which means they made a lot of gerim. The fact is you go out there, you want to come across having God look good to people, right? Which basically means that you're looking at their standard. Right? If your God is, you want to get people to love God, you're basically saying that you have something inside you that makes you love someone, or makes you love the entity. So God has to meet that entity. Right? You don't love. When you talk about loving God, you have to you basically have to see God in a way that He can be loved. Especially if you're going to go out to people and say, hey, listen, if I love God, I want to get other people to love God, you have to portray God in a certain fashion. Now, I'm not saying that in a way you have to sort of manipulate it to try and get people to follow it. But the fact is that you're basically saying that if you're looking at this idea of an emotion, and human beings have an emotion, of love, they have reasons for why they love things or entities or beings. And the point is that becomes a standard. In a sense that if there's a concept of I'm supposed to try and create love of God out there in the masses, then what makes people love God has to be a consideration in my presentation of God. And that's not supposed to be manipulative. That's because you're supposed to believe that is something about God. That's a reality of who God is. So the point is, it becomes a yardstick. That if God is someone who is, and I'm using that in our language, is someone who's supposed to be loved, then in a certain way, He has to meet criteria that is something where Okay, so he has to be a being that I'm able to love. Yeah.
I have an outside thought. How successful was Avram in getting people to love the Almighty? And part of the definition of success would be, did it last all while he was around as a personality, or did it last with people able to take what they learned and basically survive a few generations?
That's a good question. The people ask if Avram made a lot of people Gerim or monotheists, believer in God. So what happened to them all? Where are they? By Yitzchak you don't hear anymore about the throngs, and by Yaakov he's all alone. So what happened to all the Gerim, or the monotheists and so forth? So it's a big issue. So some people point out, I heard one Hasidic Rabbi give an answer that said that it was personality driven. There's an aspect where Avram he was really a Baal Chesed, and he really made people feel great. Yitzchak was a totally different personality. And because he was a totally different personality, these people were expecting, Mr. Warmth and Avram, and Yitzchak was not Mr. Warmth. Now, this Hasidic Rebbe said, don't think Yitzchak didn't try to be Machnes Orach. Of course he tried to be Machnes Orach. Of course he tried to do this. But the fact of the matter is, there's something about your personality, right? There's a difference between someone who really likes greeting people and being someone who feels that they have to greet people. Like I always say something. It's like when people talk about mitzvah bikur cholim, of going to visit the sick. So you have a person who's really very involved in mitzvah. He tells everyone they should go visit the sick. The fact of the matter is, you have some people go visit the sick, and they make the sick, they make it sicker. And they're saying, because the truth is that some things are tied to personality. However, the truth is, on a certain level, and by the way, this is going to be an issue in that I know sociologists are talking about it in terms of the cure of their generations that we've had, in the sense what's going to happen with the second and third generation. But there's a fact where if you are attracted to the religion because of warmth, there's got to be a certain point in time that it's got to shift and become much more sophisticated type of feeling. You don't love God just because he's loving and so forth and so forth. That becomes an issue. So what happens when things aren't so loving, or don't perceive to be so loving?
So the Hasidic movement had to eventually become more intellectual, had to have limud in there, right?
Okay, so you're being hopeful and but the fact is that that doesn't take away from the fact that there is an aspect of love of God. There has to be, the point is that in a certain way, what I'm really trying to point out from this is that in a relationship means that there's two people involved in a relationship. You can't just say to someone, listen, I'm just going to program you, and whatever way I program you, it's fine. The fact is, we come with certain personalities, with certain feelings. You can't tell me to love someone who I have no interest in loving that type of person. Person says, listen, it's like trying to get someone to like baseball, right? And I used to say something about liking baseball. It says, if there's certain people that if you go up to one person and says, I got tickets to the World Series, first baseline side, so forth and so forth. Would you like them? Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Okay. Another person, you go up to another person and say, I got the same tickets. The person will say, how long do I have to stay there for? What, 3 hours I got to stay there for? No, thank you. I'll offer you $100 to go to the game. Okay, now we're talking. Maybe if you give me $1,000, the fact is everyone's personality. So the truth is, if you're told things like you have to love God, if you believe that a person can be programmed anyway, that's one thing. But if you believe that they have a personality, so once the Rambam says you have to go out to people and try and express some love of God, what he's basically saying is you got to take people and somehow if you're trying to get them to love God, you got to work with what they're interested in loving, right? Okay, you know, yeah.
The mental track that I was going down,
Yeah.
and maybe sort of a corrupted business view.
Yeah.
Listen, ain't many people around like Avram. If he couldn't really sort of have something that was kept on going, is it really worth to put the resources there rather than some other project?
You're talking about a very deep question. The fact is, Avram's ultimate mission. Avram was a certain personality, he represented a certain entity, a certain cause. His mission was to create Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael had to have three pillars, three legs to stand on. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Avram had to represent a certain type of concept, certain type of representative, a certain type of personality, and so forth and so forth. That personality is not going to create a lasting Klal Yisrael alone. He has to have a Yitzchak and he has to have a Yaakov. At that point in time, Avram's goal was not to proselytize the world. His personality was one of proselytizer. But the fact is that whatever he was doing did not have a lasting effect. That's just because that entity in itself can't work. Okay? Religion can't work. I mean, depth of Torah can't work by selling someone on what you like.
But if you combine the three pillars
right.
At the beginning, it still didn't work, apparently.
The fact is that then you have to look at what happens through the generations and how did it affect things. In certain ways, whatever it gets to the issue of how did Klal Yisrael affect the world. In a certain way, there's a lot more morality in the world because of our presence than otherwise. But
even Moshe Rabbeinu had a generation gap.
Right.
That he
right.
couldn't really communicate in the same way.
Right. But the thing I'm trying to point out from the mitzvahs of Avos Hashem, okay, and we still have to get into Chilul Hashem, and I guess we'll have to do it next time. We'll finally get into that article next time. But the fact is, because I just was introducing Chilul Hashem because there's a lot more definitions to it. But the fact is it seems to say that, what I'm trying to get at is, it's very easy to talk of religion as only top-down, right? Revelational ethics, right? And it's very easy to see human beings as basically blank pages, right? I'll tell you what's right, I'll tell you what's wrong, okay? This is right, this is wrong, this is simple, so forth and so forth. But when you start dealing with the fact that human beings have personalities, are not blank pages, then how do you get them to come on board? Well, one way is, we're going to try and brainwash them. We're going to try and make them into blank pages. If we make them into blank pages, then we can just feed them the data and the info, and there's no problems. But if you actually take their personalities, well, it means that somehow their personality is going to relate with it. If I'm telling them, hey, listen, I have to go to people and say, love God, well, in a certain way, I have to present God to them in a certain way that will make them love Him, because they're working as entities. They're not blank pages, and that's what I'm trying to bring from the Avos Hashem, is the fact that we do deal with human beings as they are, and one of the factors of human beings is a moral sense. Now, that raises a lot of issues. How do you relate to that moral sense? Okay, and the one thing we have to get to is Chilul Hashem, and hopefully, well, that's going to be an important factor like that.